Some houses are remembered because of who lived there. Some are remembered because of what happened there. And some houses become something else entirely. A place people point to in a quiet voice. A place where the past doesn't feel like the past. A place where every room seems to be holding its breath. In Villisca, Iowa, there's a small white house that looks almost ordinary from the outside. A porch, windows, a simple roof line, a quiet street. The kind of house you might pass without thinking much about it, unless you know the story. Because in June of 1912, 8 people were murdered inside that house while they slept. A father, a mother, their 4 children, and 2 young girls who were spending the night. The killer was never definitively identified. The case was never truly solved, and over a century later, people still visit the house. Some come for the history, some come for the mystery, some come for the ghosts. They report children's voices, footsteps, doors moving, objects shifting, strange sounds in empty rooms, and the feeling that the house is not empty, not even now. Tonight, we're entering one of the most infamous haunted houses in America, but carefully, because this is not just a ghost story. It's not just paranormal attraction. It's the site of a real tragedy. 8 people died there. 6 of them were children. So tonight, we're going to follow the haunting, but we're not going to forget the victims. This is the story of the Villisca Axe Murder House, a house with no answers, a crime with no resolution, and rooms that, according to some, still have not gone quiet. Let's tune in. Somewhere between fact, folklore, and late night speculation, there are stories that refuse to disappear, signals sent in the noise, legends whispered in the dark, and mysteries that somehow feel stranger the deeper you dig. Welcome to Dead Signal Radio, strange stories from the edge of static. I'm Michael, and tonight we're going to Villisca, Iowa, to talk about one of America's most disturbing haunted houses. This episode continues our haunted location run, but it's different from Waverly Hills, Easter State, and Trans-Allegheny. Those are institutions, hospitals, prisons, asylums, large buildings where suffering accumulated over years. Villisca is smaller, more intimate, and that makes it worse. Because this was not a massive institution. It was a home, a family home, a place that should have been safe, a place where children slept, a place where the ordinary world was supposed to hold. And then, in one night, something entered that home and destroyed it. Tonight, we'll talk about what happened, the suspects and unanswered questions, the paranormal reports, the strange atmosphere of the house, and why Villisca still feels so deeply unsettling. Because some hauntings are built from centuries of history, and some are built from one night. Villisca, Iowa was a small town in 1912, a close community, the kind of place where people knew each other, a kind of place where church, family, work, and reputation mattered. The house at the center of the story belonged to Josiah and Sarah Moore. Josiah Moore was a local businessman. Sarah was his wife. Together, they had 4 children: Herman, Catherine, Arthur, and Paul. On the night of June 9th, 1912, the Moore family attended a children's program at their church. 2 young sisters, Lena and Ina Stillinger, went home with them afterwards to spend the night. That part's important, because nothing about the evening sounded like the beginning of a nightmare. It was ordinary. Church, children, family, a sleepover, and then bedtime. The kind of night that should disappear into routine. But sometime after the house went quiet, someone entered. The killer used an axe. By morning, all 8 people inside were dead. Josiah and Sarah Moore, their 4 children, and the 2 Stillinger girls. No one in the house survived. No one could say what happened. No one could name the person who came in after dark. And that silence is part of why Villisca became a legend. Because a solved crime can eventually become history. An unsolved crime stays open. It keeps asking, it keeps accusing, it keeps whispering. Someone did this and got away with it. The morning after the murders, neighbors noticed something was wrong. The Moore household was unusually quiet. Chores were not being done, no one was moving around. Eventually, people checked the house, and what they find inside turned Villisca into a national story. The details of the crime scene are disturbing, and we don't need to dwell on them graphically. That is not the point of this show. But there are details that shape the mystery. The victims are found in their beds. Mirrors and windows were reportedly covered. The lamp was left without its chimney. There were signs that the killer may have remained in the house for a time. The axe belonged to Josiah Moore, and after the murders, it was left behind. Those details are part of why the case feels so unnerving. This was not a quick act of violence followed by immediate escape, at least not the way people expect. There are suggestions that the killer moved through the house with strange calm, covering reflective surfaces, moving through the rooms, leaving behind unanswered questions. And that is one of the reasons Villisca feels haunted even before we talk about ghosts. The crime itself feels like a message no one can read. Why cover the mirrors? Why cover the windows? Why stay? Why this family? Why that height? Why the children? Why the Stillinger sisters? Why was no one caught? A haunting does not always begin with a ghost. Sometimes it begins with questions that refuse to die. The Villisca murders shattered the town. That's not hard to understand. In a small community, a crime like this does not stay inside one house. It spreads. It enters every conversation, every church pew, every business, every street, every family that suddenly wonders whether their own door is safe. The fear must have been enormous, because the killer was not immediately identified. That meant the person responsible could have been anyone: a stranger passing through, a local enemy, a business rival, a disturbed creature, a serial killer, someone known, someone unknown, and someone still nearby. That uncertainty is its own kind of terror. And over time, multiple suspects and theories emerged. One of the most discussed suspects was Reverend George Kelly, a traveling minister who'd been in town around the time of the murders. He later confessed, but the confession was controversial, and he was ultimately acquitted. Another theory involved Frank Jones, a local businessman and political figure who had personal and business tensions with Josiah Moore. Other theories suggest a traveling killer, possibly connected to other axe murders in the region. But none of it closed the case. There's no final answer, no conviction that settled history, no clean ending, just theories. And when there's no justice, folklore moves in. That is one of the darkest truths about Villisca. The house became haunted in part because the crime never found an ending. If the killer had been caught, tried, and remembered by name, maybe the story would feel different. Still tragic, still awful, but more complete. Instead, the house remains attached to absence. No answer, no confession anyone can fully trust, no certainty, no final door closing. That haunting is material. One of the most chilling things about Villisca is that the house is the only witness left. The people inside couldn't speak. The killer didn't leave a clear explanation. The town could only reconstruct what it could. So the house becomes the thing people look to: the rooms, the staircase, the bedrooms, the attic, the walls, the layout, the quiet. Visitors should go there today are not just visiting a historic crime scene. They're entering the last physical container of the event. That changes the experience. Because the battlefield is large, a hospital is institutional, a prison is built for confinement, but a house is personal. You can imagine people living there, eating there, laughing there, putting children to bed there. That intimacy is why haunted houses work so well. The fear is not abstract, it's domestic. A haunted prison says, something happened to people who were locked away. A haunted hospital says, something happened to people who were sick. A haunted house says, something happened where people were supposed to feel safest. That hits differently. And Villisca may be one of the most powerful examples of that in America. Because the house didn't just witness death, it witnessed the destruction of ordinary safety. Many of the paranormal reports from Villisca involve children. Visitors and investigators have claimed to hear children's voices: whispers, laughing, crying, movement. Some report toys moving, others describe balls rolling or objects shifting. Some say they feel touched. Some say they hear footsteps in rooms where no one's walking. The house is especially known for experiences involving the upstairs bedrooms and the children. And this is where the story becomes emotionally difficult. Because child ghost stories are powerful. But with Villisca, they're not just spooky. They are tied to real children who died violently. That means we need to approach the haunting with care. If people hear children's voices in the Villisca house, that's not just a paranormal thrill. It's a question of whether something innocent remained trapped in a place where innocence was destroyed. That's heartbreaking. Now, skeptically, there are explanations to consider. Old houses make noise, visitors arrive expecting activity, equipment can misread sounds, people can hear patterned static. The emotional weight of the location can make every small noise feel meaningful. And when you know children died in the house, your mind may especially be ready to interpret sounds as children. That's a fair point. But even with skepticism, I understand why the reports affect people. Because the idea of a child's voice in that house is not just frightening, it's mournful. It's the kind of haunting that makes you lower your voice without realizing it. One of the creepiest parts of the Villisca legend involves the attic. Some theories suggest the killer may have hidden in the attic before the family returned home from church. Imagine that. Family comes home, children get ready for bed, the house settles, everyone's asleep. But somewhere above them, in the dark, someone waits. That possibility may be one of the most frightening parts of the entire story because it transforms the house from a place that was invaded into a place that had already been compromised. The danger was not outside, it was already inside, waiting. Whether that theory is true or not has become part of the atmosphere of Villisca. Attics are already unsettling. They are liminal spaces, storage spaces, dark, dusty, above the living areas, full of things people don't use but can't throw away. In a haunted house story, an attic is almost never just an attic. It's where secrets go. And in Villisca, the attic becomes a symbol of the unknown killer, the unseen presence, the thing above the family before everything happened. Visitors have reported strange sensations connected to that attic. Sounds, movement, the feeling of not being alone. And again, whether paranormal or psychological, that makes sense. Because once you know the attic theory, the space changes. It becomes not just part of the house, but part of the dread. Today, the Villisca Axe Murder House is open for tourists and overnight stays. That alone says something about how haunted places function in modern culture. People don't just want to read about the house, they want to enter it, sit inside it, sleep inside of it, listen in the dark, wait for something to happen. There's something strange about that, maybe even uncomfortable. A place where 8 people were murdered has become a destination for paranormal investigators, true crime followers, history buffs, and thrill seekers. And I think we have to be honest about the tension here. On one hand, preserving the house keeps the history alive. People learn the names, people remember the victims, people keep asking questions. On the other hand, there's always the risk of turning tragedy into entertainment, and that line matters, especially with Villisca. Because the house isn't creepy because of a legend someone invented. It's creepy because real people died there. So if someone visits, investigates, records, or talks about Villisca, respect has to come first. That doesn't mean you can't be curious. That doesn't mean you can't believe it's haunted. That doesn't mean you can't explore the paranormal side. What it does mean is the victims should never become props. The house may be famous, the ghosts may be the draw, but the people are the reason the story matters. The reported paranormal activity in Vista covers a wide range: children's voices, footsteps, doors opening or closing, objects moving, batteries draining, cold spots, disembodied sounds, feelings of sadness or dread. People report being touched. Some say they hear whispers. Some claim to capture EVPs. Some say the house feels calm at first and then changes after dark. That last part's interesting because many haunted places are described as feeling different at night. Some of that is obvious. Darkness changes everything. Your vision narrows, your hearing sharpens, your imagination fills in empty spaces. The ordinary becomes suspicious. A floorboard creaks, and you freeze. A shadow shifts, and your stomach drops. In a place like Villisca, darkness has help because you already know what happened there at night. You know the family went to sleep. You know the killer moved through the house. You know morning came, and the world was different. So spending the night in that house is not just being in darkness. It's being in the same kind of time when the crime happened. Night becomes part of the haunting. Not just because the ghosts may be more active, because memory is. One detail from the crime scene that often stays with people is the covering of the mirrors. Mirrors and reflective surfaces are reportedly covered. That detail feels almost ritualistic, and because of that, it's become one of the most discussed parts of the case. Why would the killer cover mirrors? There are practical theories. Maybe the killer didn't want to see himself. Maybe reflections startled him. Maybe he was mentally disturbed. Maybe it had some symbolic meaning. Maybe it meant something in the way people later imagined. But as a haunted house detail, it's incredibly powerful. Mirrors are already strange objects in folklore. They reflect, they double, they distort. They're tied to old superstitions about death, spirits, portals, vanity, identity, and the soul. A covered mirror in a murder house feels like a warning, like someone who's trying to prevent something from looking back, or trying not to be seen, or trying to keep the house from witnessing too much. Again, that may be storytelling more than evidence, but that's how hauntings grow. A real detail becomes symbolic. A symbol becomes part of legend. And in Villisca, the covered mirrors are one of those details that make the crime feel stranger than violence alone. They make it feel haunted before anyone reports a ghost. Most haunted locations have a reason people think spirits remain. Tragedy, violence, sudden death, unfinished business. Villisca has all of that. But the unresolved nature of the case adds another layer. There's no final answer, no confirmed killer, no clear motive, no justice that everyone accepts, and that makes the house feel unfinished. And unfinished stories are the ones that haunt us most. A ghost, in many traditions, is a person or presence that can't move on. A mystery can work the same way. The Villisca case cannot move on because it has no ending. Every suspect opens another question. Every theory leaves something unresolved. Every explanation has gaps. That means the house remains suspended, not just historically, emotionally. It's a place where the past didn't close. And maybe that's why people feel something there. Maybe the haunting is not only the dead, maybe it's the question, who did this? Why? How did they vanish? And why did the house survive to keep asking? Now, let's take the skeptical pass. Do the paranormal reports prove the Lisca house is haunted? No, not by themselves. Old houses make noise, wood expands and contracts, floors creak, pipes knock, wind moves through small spaces, animals can create sounds, and visitors influence each other. A person sitting in the dark in one of America's most famous murder houses is not going to interpret sound neutrally. That's just human. If you hear a noise in your own house, you might think pipe, floorboard, air vent. But if you hear the same noise in Villisca at 2 a.m., your brain's probably not calmly filing it under normal structural settling. Your brain's probably saying, absolutely not. We're leaving. And honestly, that's fair. Expectation matters. Fear matters. The reputation of the house matters. The story primes people to experience something. That doesn't mean we're lying. It means the setting is powerful. And powerful settings shape perception. But skepticism should not flatten the experience either. Some people leave the list genuinely shaken. Some reports that some report things they cannot explain. Some say the house changes after dark. Some claim the voices feel intelligent. Some say the atmosphere is unlike any other haunted place they've visited. Maybe those are psychological responses. Maybe some are misinterpretations. Maybe some are something else. The honest answer is that we can't prove the haunting, but we can understand why the house feels haunted. Now, let's lean into the paranormal possibility. What if Villisca is haunted? What if the house is not just historically significant, but spiritually active? What if the voices people report are not imagination? And what if the children are still there? And what if the footsteps are not settling wood? What if the attic still holds the feeling of someone waiting? What if the covered mirrors were not just a crime scene detail, but part of something darker? That's the question that brings people to Villisca. Not just what happened, but what remains. The paranormal case for Villisca doesn't depend on one single dramatic ghost story. It depends on an accumulation. The crime, the silence, the children's voices, the moving objects, the overnight reports, the attic, the mirrors, the emotional pressure of the house. And the fact that more than a century later, people still feel like the house is occupied. A haunting doesn't always need a full-bodied apparition at the end of the hallway. Sometimes it's enough for a room to feel like it remembers. And Villisca feels like a house that remembers too much. Villisca feels different because it's small. That may sound strange, but it matters. A huge asylum can overwhelm you. A prison can intimidate you. A sanatorium can feel institutional and distant. But a house is human size. You can understand it. You can see where people slept, where they moved, where doors led, where stairs climbed, where a family ended their day. That makes the horror closer. You don't need to imagine hundreds of patients or prisoners. You imagine one family, one night, one house, and that's enough. The paranormal reports become more personal because the location is personal. A child's voice in a hospital hallway is sad. A child's voice in the bedroom where children died is something else entirely. That's why Villisca must be handled carefully. The house is not scary because it's large or dramatic. It's scary because it's ordinary. And ordinary places become unsafe as and ordinary places becoming unsafe is one of the deepest fears we have. So what do I think about Villisca? I think it's one of the most disturbing haunted houses in America. Not because it has the most elaborate ghost stories, and not because it has the most dramatic legends, and not because it's the biggest or darkest or most theatrical, but because it's intimate. A family went to sleep, and they never woke up. Two young guests were in the wrong house on the wrong night. A killer walked away, but the house stayed. That alone is haunting. Do I think spirits remain there? I can't prove that. Do I understand why people believe they do? Absolutely. Because if any house could feel unfinished, it would be this one. A house where children died, a house where the killer was never definitively named, a house where mirrors were covered, a house where the attic became part of the fear, a house where visitors still listen for voices in the dark. Maybe the sounds are old wood, maybe the voices are expectation, maybe the activity is the human mind trying to make sense of a place that feels wrong. Or maybe something remains. Something scared, something confused, something still waiting for the morning that never came. I don't know. But I do know this. Villisca is not just haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by the absence of an answer. And sometimes that's the loudest haunting of all. That's all for tonight. Thanks for spending a little time with me here at Dead Silver Radio. If you enjoyed tonight's mystery, follow along for more strange stories, legends, haunted places, and late night rabbit holes. Until next time, stay curious. And if you hear static, maybe listen a little closer.